Good evening. Welcome to another edition of the Gersnet Podcast, the independent Rangers podcast by fans for fans, where all the content is absolutely free. Coming to you in association with Forrest Precision Engineering. I'm your host tonight, Brian Archer, and as always, would encourage you to get onto the Gersnet website, check out our forums for all your latest Rangers news and discussion. We're live tonight on the YouTube channel and would ask that you continue to share the podcast on social media, spread the word, and please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Before I introduce my guest for tonight, I need to give another mention to our partners over at Forrest Precision Engineering, a Glasgow-based engineering company who have been a big commercial supporter of Rangers for a number of years, and we're delighted to have them supporting the podcast. If you want more information about them, please visit their website at www.forestprecisioneng.com. They also have a stunning executive lounge in the Ibrox main stand. For more information on that, email the club at hospitality@rangers.co.uk. Right, now we bring in my guests. Joining me tonight, firstly, is Alan Rogers. Alan, how you doing?
Yeah, no bad, mate. Happier after that, although having seen Scott turn up in his made-to-measure suit, I feel a bit underdressed, you know?
And he's kind of putting his auto show tonight, isn't he? Also joining us, Scott Bradley. Scott, how you doing?
I'm very well, mate. I'm very well. And it's honestly, Brian, it's a pleasure to finally be on the podcast with you. And it's been a long time coming, mate, but you're looking very well, mate.
Thank you. Not quite as sharp as you in your suit. Scott, we'll get into it. First of all, the team news came out. Were you surprised that he went with an unchanged side from last week?
No, I wasn't, Brian, if I'm being totally honest. Whereas obviously, like, I think we all kind of know that Barry Ferguson he's obviously going to back himself to get this Rangers job. But that's the thing, though. We all know he's not going to get it. But it didn't shock me in the slightest. Obviously, it didn't shock me at all. Just the fact that he did go with a strong team. But see, Barami, though, obviously we will touch on that. That's maybe one thing that kind of surprised me, the fact he started with him, and obviously he got hauled off at half time. And I think it's safe to say, Brian, that Barami, as a signing, is not worked out whatsoever. Because obviously I think we had some high hopes when we actually signed him, and then obviously it's definitely not worked out at all. And I think it's safe to say, Brian, in the summer he'll be off in the summer. But in terms of the team, though, it's just like Ferguson, though, like he loves to change it up quite a bit, and and also as well the fact that he's got nothing to lose. So that hence why we've been seeing him like chop and change the system so much. But no, I wasn't all that shocked when I seen obviously the team, and of course it worked out in the end because we won 4-0.
Yeah, I suppose so. Alan, will these post-split fixtures not an opportunity to give some proper game time to some youngsters and try and build something for next season? You know, effectively there wasn't really anything to play for in terms of, you know, there wasn't a league challenge, unfortunately. So was it not an opportunity to really bed in players like Inciala, Bailey, Rice, you know, really give Igman a proper run as a starting centre forward? Have we maybe missed an opportunity here?
Yeah, I definitely think it's a missed opportunity. You know, as you say, there's nothing at stake really in these games, so why not just give them a chance and see where they go? On the flip side, I can understand Ferguson's reluctance to do that. As Scott says, he clearly still thinks he's in with a shout at getting this job. He clearly wants the job in the summer. And say he played a bunch of youngsters in Aberdeen and come to Ibrox and won 2-0. You know, it's not going to help his chances. And it's quite a Scottish mentality, I think, to sort of go with the tried and tested, experienced players, you know, keep it safe. So I can understand why he did it in that sense. I certainly think we should have used these games to try and blood some more youngsters, get some more minutes in the legs. But I can also see why he wouldn't do it. And of course, you know, it was a 4-0 victory, quite a comfortable victory. So you can say the manager did get it right, at least to send the fans home happy to some degree.
Yeah, Scott, that first half was a complete non-event as far as I could see. So I'm not going to go into it in any detail, but it was retro shirt day at Ibrox in memory of Jimmy Bell. So instead of talking about the first half, what's your favourite Rangers retro shirt?
Oh, well, obviously I'm 28, right? But if I had to pick one, right, this might be controversial, but I would probably actually say, I don't know if this counts as that retro one, but I'm just going to say it anyway. My favourite ever Rangers strip would be, do you know the Rangers strip from the 2007-2008 season? One, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, from the UEFA Cup final.
Yes, that would be my favourite one, actually. Brian, that would be my favourite one. I think it's just pure nostalgia for me with that one. But if I had to really pick, if I had to pinpoint, apart from that, if I had to pinpoint my favourite other Rangers shot, it would need to be the 9-0 one. Even though I was about when we won 9 in a row, I was about 2 months old or something like that. so I'll probably say either one of those two. But what were you? What's your favourite one?
For me, mine's probably a bit of a controversial one, and I'm not sure if you can consider it retro yet, but I actually think the 2012-13 shirt, I know it's the one we wore when we were in the third division, so it's never going to get the credit it deserves, but I think that's an absolute cracker of a strip.
I agree.
Just the fact that it's so plain, it's got the small 10-inch sponsor. It was obviously, I think it was a kind of homage to the 72 shirt, the Barca 72 shirt. I think it was homage to that, but that it'll never get the credit it deserves because of the circumstances in which we wore it. You know, it was a first season in the third division and everything that went on during that summer. But I think that is a cracker of a shot for me. What about you, Alan?
Can I just point out how disgusting it is and how old I feel that 2008 is now considered retro and nostalgia? I mean, come off it. That's outrageous. I just feel terrible now. But no, nevertheless, I'm a good bit older than you, Scott. So, favourite retro strip, you're probably maybe talking 92, 93, classic Adidas. You know, happy memories there. Also the 95, 96 was it? So Gaza's first season with the McEwens and the sort of central badge. I liked that one as well. But yeah. You two whippersnappers probably never watched Rangers play in that strip, so we'll move on.
Unfortunately, I missed it. I missed those good times. Unfortunately, while you were watching Gaza and Loudrop, I've been watching, France and Daza and players of that ilk in my kind of.
I've got to say, just to pick you up on it, Brian. I mean, I understand what you're saying about the play in the 2012 shirt. It's plain and it's sort of traditional, but I would consign that whole period to the bin if I possibly could. The last thing I want to see is anyone at Ibrox wearing that top. Do you know what I mean? Absolutely grim. Absolutely grim.
Can I say as well, right? Even though that top, Brian, that top was a cracker, right? But see, anytime I think about that top, the first person that comes to mind is Ian Black, because he was our first signing during that period of the dark ages. So,
it's funny because the first signing that comes to mind when I think of that top's actually David Templeton. And he was one that I was actually really excited to sign him, and I thought he would kind of rip it up for us in those circumstances in the lower divisions. I thought he would go on and do really well, but unfortunately, kind of a career blighted by injury.
Sadly for me, that top, I mean, for that whole period, but that specific top just reminds me of Kevin Kyle's moves.
Yeah, how long did we sign him for? What was it? We had him for about 8 months or so. And even Coisty was like, Kevin, mate, it's not happening. It's not happening.
I didn't think we'd be talking about Kevin Kyle's moves on a Sunday night. But,
what a start! What a start to the show.
Anyway, but bringing it back to the match, I'm not going to talk about the first half. Probably the most interesting thing that happened was the half-time substitute, Alan. Scott mentioned when Rami got hooked at half-time, he's just not really impressed, has he? I mean, for you, is this a transfer? It's clearly been a costly mistake so far. Has it got all the signs of kind of trying to offload him in the summer?
I mean, I think so. I mean, as you say, it's just not worked out. He's just one of these. He's just a bit of an insipid player. There's moments where technically he looks okay on the ball and he can do bits and pieces, but I just don't really know what he is. He's not a striker. Obviously, he doesn't really look like a 10 to me. He's not a winger. He's got no pace. He's not a tackler. He's not a workhorse. He's not a ball carrier. I just don't really know what he is. And he just doesn't fit in the side. And I think we've seen him play sort of right, left, centre, or 10. And the only real decent, notable performance he's put in was the League Cup final, where he did a man marking job on the opposition captain. So, he did it well, in fairness to him, but that wasn't what he was bought for. So I just think it's just a sign it's not worked out. It's a deadline day signing from last summer. We were obviously scrabbling about trying to get someone in. He obviously wanted to leave. I think I'm right in saying his club was relegated. I think I'm right in saying. So he presumably wanted out, and it's just one of those moves that everybody just agreed to, presumably at the last minute, because he was one of those players we hadn't been linked to him previously. It was like kind of just sprung up on deadline day out of the blue. So agent probably making calls, and we've just kind of jumped at it. It's not really worked out. Again, he's probably a reasonable player somewhere, but he doesn't look ready for the flying elbows of the SPFL. So I'd certainly be looking to move him on and just hope that we don't lose money on him.
Yeah, it certainly looks that way. Scott, on to one of the more positive aspects of today's performance was Nico Raskin for me. 2 assists today, and to be honest, this season he's kind of been a bit of a shining light since he came back into the team. He's managed to keep himself fit of late, which was a problem at the start of his Rangers career. But is it a case for him of he either needs to sign a new deal in the summer, or we need to sell him because we can't afford to let him walk free for nothing in a couple of years' time?
Yeah, I think that should be one of our top priorities this summer, Brian, is the fact that we should be looking to obviously like get Nico Raskin on a long-term deal, because this season he's been arguably our best player. He's been phenomenal, and he's, as you said, he's been a shining light, and he's bossed the midfield for Rangers this season. Bossed it. He's been tremendous, and obviously he got Player of the Year, and he completely deserved that. But when you look back at our player training model over the last few years, as we all know, it's been abysmal. It's been embarrassing. The fact that we let Morelos and Ryan Kent go for hee-haw, right? And it should be Nico Raskin. He's a player that we need to. If he was to, for example, if he doesn't want to sign a new deal in the summer, we need to cut ties with him. But if we get him nailed down in a long-term contract, I think that'll be huge for us, because Raskin, he said it before, he's got big ambitions to make it down south. He did say I think he said he would love to play for Chelsea one day, I think it was. Well, the only way that's going to happen is if he does it up here and succeeds, because we all know, I hate saying it, but Rangers, obviously we need these kind of players arrive at Rangers and Celtic. Let's be honest, they're using us as stepping stones to go down south and go to La Liga or whatever, right? So if we see next season, if Raskin signs a new deal, my God, I think he will be. I think he can really kick on, and then we can get a big fee for him. But yeah, I think that's. I think in the summer, if he doesn't want to sign a new deal, okay, then let's just sell him. But if he wants to sign a new deal, perfect. And then I think we could probably, right now, how well he's playing, I think we could probably get, I'm not even exaggerating saying this, but I think we could probably get about 20 to 25 million for him if he keeps the kind of form that he's going on just now, So I think we could probably get a big hefty fee for him if he keeps doing what he's doing.
Alan, if we do manage to tie him down, can he be a player that we build a new look Rangers around for next season?
I think so. I certainly think so. It's been a while coming for Raskin. He's been here, and we've seen good things from him, and we all kind of liked him, but we were always worried his Rangers career maybe didn't quite take off. And he got an unfortunate injury last season that kept him out and then never really got back in the team. And even at the start of this season, he got injured again pre-season, then didn't really get in. And everybody was thinking he was maybe just going to peter out. But fair play to him, he's come back. It's his first real prolonged run in the team. He's done really well. He's probably these days our first name on the team sheet, if we're honest. And he's one of our better performers on the European stage as well. He was unlucky to hit the post in Bilbao. So I think if he keeps performing at that level, then he can really go far in the game. As Scott says, if we can tie him down, keep him up in that level, and if he can perform crucially, whether we're in Champions League or Europa League next season, if he can perform at that level and continue being in and around Belgian squads, then there's no reason we can't get a really, really good fee for him in the near future. So I definitely, my preference, of course, put Rangers first, is that he signs a new deal, we keep him, and he continues developing. But we have to be realistic. If we sit him down in the summer and his agent's well aware of how well he's doing, his reputation is really good, and he's now capped for Belgium, his agent will be sitting down, right, well, show me the money. And it may well be that we just can't afford to get him a new deal. I mean, it's possible, not to be the pessimist, but it's possible. But even then, that's not a terrible situation for us to be in. We need to get used to being in these situations whereby there comes a point where this player now just has to be sold. And Raskin, will he ever be at a greater peak value than he is just now? Maybe not. Maybe not. So if we can't get him tied up, then we should shake his hand and say, thanks for everything. We want 12 million, 14, not 50, whatever it is, and just say to his agent, go get him the move. Because I think he'll get the move. That's the crucial thing. We've been in situations before in seasons gone by whereby we've thought, right, we want to sell this player. We think we want to move this player on, but we've not really got any bids and no real interest in them. And we've kind of been stuck with players. I don't think there's any chance that's going to happen with Raskin. I think there'll definitely be suitors for him in the summer. So we should strike while the iron's hot if we can't get him tied down. And it's no bad thing, it's part of player trading. You've got the takeover coming. Okay, we'd all like to see him stay, but if he moves on and we get 8 figures for him, fine. It's money in the bank that we can reinvest in the squad at a nice time, and he'll prove to have been a really successful signing for us over the piece.
Yeah, I think as supporters we probably need to get comfortable with selling our players at their peak value. It's probably something that in years gone by we've never had to do, but I think now obviously football's changing, and I think we need to get comfortable with that idea that we're going to start selling our players at their peak value.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's key, but I think the support are ready for it as long as the fee's correct. We'd just come off Seville and Bassi was man of the match, and nobody grumbled about selling him at that point because the fee was so good and everybody accepted. We have to take that. Fair play to him, he's done brilliantly. Again, if Bassi came back to do a half-time draw, he'd get a great reception at Ibrox. Everyone appreciates he had to move at that moment in time. But as we mentioned earlier on, guys like Kent and Morelos and Barisic, these guys, they had a peak value. Probably was after Seville for those guys as well, mind you. And we've just sat in our hands and done nothing with it. So we have to learn lessons from that. And again, it might be a wee bit painful just because you want to keep your best players, but you have to think of the good of the club. And selling a player for say 8 figures every single summer is something that Rangers should really be aiming to try and do.
Yeah, Scott, is Hamza Egeman another player that we're probably going to have this conversation about as well in windows to come? He scored another excellent goal today, showing what a talent he is. He's probably not had the starts that he would want of late, but if we're talking about building the midfield around Raskin for next season, can we build the forward line around Egemani, or is he still too raw? Would you still prefer we go out and get a more kind of experienced number 9 to lead the line for next season?
See, obviously when it comes to Egeman, I was going to ask you this as well. Have you ever seen Egeman score a bad goal? Guy
he doesn't ever score tackles. He always tap ins. He always scores, cracking goals.
But go to your question though. I think we should, mate. I think we should build the front line around him because the guy is quality. Yes, he might. A lot of people are saying, he's a bit raw and whatnot, but the guy's clearly got talent. And of course, he had a wee bit of a bad spell. I think obviously a few months ago where he didn't score in about 10 games or something. But the guy's clearly talented, and we could sell him for a lot of money. Because one thing that did kind of worry me back in January was the fact that I thought we were going to panic and jump the gun. Where if we got £10 million for Egeman, we would sell him for that. Where we could actually sell him for quite a lot because guy is so good. He is, and even when you look at his goal today, just like that lovely wee volley, boom, back in the net, and it's just I think he can be the real deal for us, mate. And but yeah, that's what I would look to do in the summer is try and build the front line around him because if he's got huge potential. And what was it? I think he's about 20 years old, and this is his first season playing professional football, and look how good he's been. So yeah, as obviously we were saying earlier on about talking about the player training model. Yes, of course, we need some of these players. We'll need to move on at some point, but obviously we can't be mugs, mate. We can't be mugs. We need to we need, like as Alan was saying about Calvin Bassey, when we sold Bassey, it made sense. But it was like, okay, no one had any issues with it because Bassey's been great and we've got a fantastic fee for him. And when you look at some of the players that have left us previously, the only kind of big fees that we've had for players that have moved on have been Nathan Patterson, Calvin Bassey, Joe Aribo, £6 million. That was ridiculous. We should have got more for that. But obviously, I think Joe Aribo was in his final year in his deal. So, but obviously we need to be smart though. And I think with this new ownership coming in, director of football and all that kind of thing, I think they'll be much more wiser and much more street smart compared to the previous regime when it comes to selling players and all that kind of thing. Because honestly, it really does annoy me the fact that we still let Ryan Kent and Morelos go for hee-haw when we should have sold Morelos for probably about 15-20 million. Ryan Kent, probably about the same amount. And that's one thing I really hate saying, Brian, is the fact that Celtic, their player training model it's brilliant, and it pains me saying that. And when it comes to that, they're light years ahead of us, and that's not a good thing.
It was certainly, I don't know if this is still the case, but maybe about a year to 18 months ago, I was in a conversation in a group chat and I had cause to look up Wikipedia for Rangers' top 10 transfer fees received. And around about 8th or 9th was Trevor Steven. Now, I can't quite remember when we sold Trevor Steven, but it was early 90s, and that was still in one of our top 10 fees. Again, he might just have dropped out of it since then, but that just shows how poor we've been in terms of actually selling players. And it's something that needs to change pretty urgently. Igaman is the perfect example of that. If I'm saying, look, we need to be aiming to try and sell a player for 8 figures every summer, okay, maybe this summer it'll be Raskin. Next summer we should aim for it to be Igaman. Build the team around, build the attack around him this summer. See what he can do next season. And if he continues developing the way he's developing, we'll have absolutely no problem at all getting 8 figures for that boy. Because as you say, he doesn't score bad goals. I remember him scoring up at Ross County. He kind of cracked a volley and it deflected and kind of looked up and looked in. That's probably one of his few goals that wouldn't make a highlights reel, which tells you all about. Look what he's done this season. He scored in Europe, home and away. He got a double away to a really good French team. He scored a perfect hat-trick at Easter Road, scored an Old Firm winner at Parkhead. He won Young Player of the Season. He must be on, 16, 17 goals for the season? And he wasn't even in the team until about October, November. It's remarkable how quickly he's come on, and, see what a new coaching team can do with him, a full pre-season behind him. I want to see him with the number 9 jersey next season, leading the line.
That's really excited to see him kind of in a team that is functioning better and with better players in the team around him. You've got to imagine that would bring him on even more as well. So that's quite an exciting prospect as well. Scott, one player that we can't sell this summer, but we will potentially be losing, is Václav Černý. Now, obviously he's on loan. Is there a realistic chance that we can keep him, or is it going to be a case of, he's done really well here and there'll be potentially bigger, clubs in bigger leagues like La Liga wanting to sign him, so we're going to lose out? Is it going to be a similar story to the likes of Tillman and Sima of seasons past?
Yeah, I think so, Brian. I love Černý. I think Černy's been unbelievable this season for us, and it does, when you think about it as well, we would be so much worse off if we didn't have Černý in the team. He's been a great player for us, but sadly, I think he will be off in the summer. From what I've heard, and I think you've probably heard it as well, that he's wanting to play, according to his agent, he wants to play in at least one of the top 5 leagues in Europe, and I think he's good enough to do that. I think Černý loves the club. He loves Rangers. I think he's really bought into the culture and all that kind of thing. But I think it's going to be too much a big ask for us to to try and convince him to stay for another season, because obviously he's I think he's about 29, 28. So I think he'll be like, you know what, I'm at my peak of my career. I don't think want to be part of a rebuilding phase at Rangers, despite the fact that he loves the club. But I think it's going to be a long shot, if I'm being honest, Brian. If we're going to get Czerny in a permanent, I would love it. I would love it, but I think he'll probably end up somewhere up the spot. He'll probably end up back in the Bundesliga or La Liga or something like that. But Czerny's he's been a real standout. He's been a real standout. But as you said, I think it'll be another one of those ones where it's like you never fall in love with a lone player, mate. Like the way it was with Tillman as well. So I think in terms of getting Czerny, I think it's very, very unlikely.
Yeah. Alan, what's your take on these types of loan deals that we've done recently? You know, we've spoke about obviously Czerny this season, Seema, Tillman of seasons past. Well, we get these talented players and we kind of fall in love with them. They do really well, but realistically, for one reason or another, there's no possibility of signing them permanently. Do we just need to accept that, enjoy them while they're here? Or is it a case of we should maybe be looking to kind of bring in our own players and try and use that spot for somebody that is going to be here long term? Or
I think, given the position we're in at the moment, we just have to accept that that's going to happen from time to time. You know, and it's good that we've got that dilemma. I think, you know, Tillman, Seema, and Czerny, again, I agree. I think he'll leave in the summer. We won't see him back. But you know, these are guys that have come in on loan and really contributed well. You know, they have. That's what a loan should do. But from the player's perspective, you've got to look at it as, you know, someone like Czerny wasn't fit, he'd been injured, he wasn't in the team. You know, what's he wanting to get out of a loan to Rangers? Well, he wants to play games, he wants to impress, and then to give himself more options. And he's done that. You know, I saw a thing today, that was his 50th game for Rangers. Czerny's played today. I don't think he's ever played 50 games in a season before. You know, he's proved his fitness, he's scored goals, he's set up goals, he's scored in Europe. He's made a really good impression. So from his personal perspective, the loan's been a huge success. And his agent, again, like Raskin, will be busy this summer because there'll be plenty of clubs that will have seen his form, primarily in Europe, and will be wanting to sign him. So Czerny's going to have loads of offers on the table in the summer. I think he has been linked with sort of Villarreal and teams at that kind of level. And you know, he will pick Villarreal over Rangers. I've got no question about that if that's genuine link. And that's exactly what these players want out of the loan. Sometimes, of course, you get someone like Seema, who, you know, according to the gossip, was really, really keen to come back, but we just couldn't afford him. So sometimes you'll get that player that kind of gets the bug a little bit. But, you know, someone like Tillman did not want to come back to Rangers. I mean, there's no issue with that. I know there was some nonsense about getting money off Bayern. The club tried to spin it as some kind of coup, but it wasn't. It was just, we got hold over the coals for it and lost a really, really good player because contractually we couldn't get it through the line, and we couldn't convince him either. So sometimes it can go a different way depending on which way it pans out. But, you know, Czerny's been a really good contributor. I think he'll get a good move off the back of it, but he will leave a huge hole in the side when he leaves. Again, I think that was his 17th or 18th goal this season, and he's got double figures assists as well. So that's a huge number of goal contributions we're going to have to replace, and it's going to cost money to replace him. So it'll be interesting to see what it is we do.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting one. Alan, a player that didn't get any game time and hasn't had any much game time of late is Oscar Cortez. Now, obviously, he's had these injury problems, I think, since that game away to Kilmarnock last season, but it really kind of halted his good form, and the team's form kind of fell off a cliff after that, to be honest. But is this one that's looking like a bit of a costly mistake in terms of we've now committed a fair chunk of a transfer budget? I think it's about £4 million we're committed to paying to bring him in permanently, but he just doesn't look like he's going to cut it, really, does he?
At the moment, I don't want to write him off, I suppose is what I'd say. When he was in the team, I think we only got maybe sort of 5 appearances out of him last season before he got injured on that stupid pitch at Rugby Park. Not the first Rangers player to get injured on that pitch. And I thought he looked good. You know, he was quite explosive, he had good ball control, decent pace, scored a lovely goal at Ibrox against Hearts on the counter-attack. And I thought this guy looks really promising. You know what to remember is, was it the Under-19s World Cup? He was rated as one of the top prospects. You know, he's highly rated, and it was a coup to get someone like Cortez. But since then, he just hasn't got going at all. I thought his start in Pataudry, I thought he looked really, really heavy. Okay, when players are out injured, they're going to naturally put on a bit of weight. But I thought he actually looked slow, quite cumbersome. And it didn't look like he could really open his legs. When he's trying to chase balls down, he was, he looked a bit like a fan trying to chase the ball. I guess not an athlete that could actually get up to full pace. It was really weird to see. And when I saw it, I vaguely remembered watching it. I remember going to the pub to watch the opening game of the season at Tynecastle when Cortez started. And I remember having the same thought at the time. He looks rusty, he looks really slow and heavy-legged. And it was exactly the same for him at Pittodrie. So it's a real concern. But look, if we're obligated to buy him, which I believe we are, he's going to be back. We're going to have a new management team, a whole new coaching staff. We've got to just keep our fingers crossed that he can get a full pre-season behind him and get his sharpness and his athleticism back. And then let's see what he can do. Because if we can get fully fit and firing Cortez back in the team, then he's our left winger. That's what we want him for. We need that. We need somebody in that position, and we've got him, and we've seen flashes from him in the past. So he's going to be here. So I just think we have to be optimistic about what he can get back to, and hopefully a new management team can get the maximum out of him. I know Ferguson said in his press conference that he's not been playing because his attitude wasn't right. Again, I always think that's a wee bit of a cop-out from a manager. If his attitude's not right and he's not training well, why is he on the bench then? There's got to be a wee bit more to it than that. And he needs to... Some players just don't train well. We always know that. It's always been the case over football. Some players are not good trainers. So you've got to give him a chance to try and prove himself, because it becomes a vicious cycle. If you're not playing him because he's not training well, then he's going to be unhappy and he's not going to be sharp, and then he's not going to train well, and then he's not going to play him because he's not training well. And it just doesn't work. And, if he's coming back and he's an asset, we need to give him some minutes. And right at the start of the pod, we said that, look, this was a chance to play some players that needed minutes, and we've not done that. So I hope to see him starting on Wednesday night and try and give him a wee bit of a chance just to get into the groove a little bit. But it's just a case of wait and see with Cortez. Looking at it pessimistically, he could go down as an absolute disaster of a sign. Potentially, he could go down as an absolute disaster of a sign. But optimistically, I think he does have some talent. So let's see if we can get out of him.
Yeah, hopefully. Scott, you were obviously in that press conference post-match when the manager made reference to Cortez's kind of performance and attitude in training. For you, does this have all the hallmarks of a player being sent out on loan for next season?
I can see that happening, Brian, if I'm being honest, because obviously Ferguson basically said it without without actually being totally blunt about it, but he was basically saying his attitude's terrible. That's what he was basically saying. And yeah, I can see that happening. And I think that might actually be for the best, because when we first signed Cortez, I was like, this guy's got something about him. Then obviously he's injury prone, but whether we like it or not, we're stuck with him. So I think at least next season, what I would do, I would at least send him out on loan for about 6 months or so, see how it goes. Because I think this could potentially, as Alan was saying as well, this could go down as one of the worst signings in Rangers history. But obviously we're lumbered with the guy now. So it's going to be one of these ones. But I think he's about 20, 21 years old. So yeah, he's still young in that sense. So that's kind of like the almost kind of like a big positive you can take, where it's like, okay, he's young. So it's not like we're lumbered with a guy who's pretty much pretty much finished, but he's not. He's still young. So I can definitely see that happening, and I think that might actually be for the best if he gets sent out on loan, because obviously he's not going to be going anywhere anytime soon. And also as well, the fact we're also going to be buying him, so it's like, when we buy him in the summer, on a permanent basis, 6 months down the line, if someone wanted to buy him on a permanent basis, who's going to want to touch him? We'll be taking a huge loss. So I think it's one of those ones where it's okay, we're stuck with him, and we just need to see it through and have a bit of patience with it. And I really hope it works out, because obviously I know he's not played much minutes for us, but from what we've actually seen of the guy, there's something there. There's something there. There's something there. So I think realistically, maybe a 6-month loan next season. That's what I would do personally.
See that happening. Alan, we spoke about a number of players tonight that kind of haven't really hit the heights and that have just come in. You know, we just spoke about Cortez, we spoke about Rami, you also got guys like Robin Proper, who's not really made an impact to speak of. Is it fair now for Niles Coppin's record to come under the microscope, especially with the new sporting director coming in?
I think so. I think at Rangers you're always under the microscope to some extent. And looking at Coppin's record, it is a mixed bag. You know, we've got, you know, the likes of Igaman coming in, obviously really high potential with him. But you have to look at some of the other players that have signed, and it's one of these things. I mean, every club signs players that don't work out for whatever reason. You know, it happens at every club. You're not going to get all your signings correct. A 7 out of 10 hit ratio for signings is good. You know, so you can't expect perfection. But what frustrates me is someone like Proper, to be honest. You know, we sold Lammers off the back of a really good loan spell, and then it looks like we've paid Goldson to leave, and then we've spent some of that Lammers money on a kind of quasi swap with 20. They take their captain who's older than Goldson and not as good, and you know, I couldn't understand the rationale behind that move. And then you see Proper, who again, he's got some qualities as a defender. I think he's a decent reader of the game, and some of the European games he's been quite good. But he is just not the type of player that succeeds at centre half in Scottish football, and that's what frustrates me. You know, the profile of player that we need for this league, and we're just not recruiting enough players that actually fit that really, really basic and obvious profile. I think it was about earlier this season. It was Clement and Coppin both said, you know, we targeted players, you know, with physicality and athleticism, and then you look at someone like Proper and say, right, but what happened there? You know, he doesn't have that. He's not that big, broad-shouldered centre half that we need, and he's not got any real aerial ability, which has really been his primary shortcoming in the time he's been here. So that's what frustrates me in terms of recruitment. It's obvious things like that we seem to be getting wrong. The flip side, of course, is you look at someone like Casemiro, you know, where he looks like a decent find. You know, he's playing for the Dutch under-21 team, so he's rated back home. He wasn't getting a game at Feyenoord. And you look at him, you know, he's athletic, he's broad-shouldered, he's got some real beef about him. That's the kind of defender that you want to see in Scottish football, and you think can succeed in Scottish football. So there's certain things that I think Coppin's done well. We have to give him credit for that. Diomande is a good player. I like Diomande, and that's another good find, albeit, you know, we paid a pretty high fee for him. But he's another one you'd expect that would make money on in due course. So there are things there to be positive about, but you're always under scrutiny at Rangers. And with the new director of football coming in, you know, you do wonder, is Coppin going to find a place in the new regime? Time will tell.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out. Scott, talking about the potential new regime, obviously Dave King spoke during the week about the whole kind of takeover, and he kind of said it was about 90% complete. Is it fair to say that the new owners are already kind of working behind the scenes and making decisions? It's not like, you know, Dave King said mid-June before it was, you know, finalised, but it's not like, you know, they're coming in and having to start from ground zero in mid-June. That it seems like they're kind of already almost in the building and making moves and making decisions. So they should be able to kind of hit the ground running in terms of things like managerial appointment, transfer activity, that sort of thing.
Yeah, no, 100%. Like, obviously, these guys aren't stupid by any means, right? They've obviously got a plan in place. And obviously, we're talking about, obviously, the report that came out during the week, the fact that the next Rangers manager won't, apparently, according to Chris Strack, who, for me, I think is the most credible Rangers journalist out there, he basically said that, obviously, the next Rangers manager won't have any affiliation towards, with the club. So that just makes you think, but it's like, okay, like they're going to think outside the box here, but it's like we have no idea who the next manager is going to be. Like, because obviously I had my heart set on Steven Gerrard, right? But if that report that Chris Jack, obviously put out was true, if it's true, then obviously Gerrard's out of the equation. But yeah, I think obviously the new owners coming in, where what Dave King said, where it was like I think Dave King might be controversial to say, but I think he's a good judge of character, and obviously he's sussed these guys out and he knows what they're all about. So that's why he's gave them the green light. So yeah, I think they've got a proper plan in place. And in terms of next season, Brian, I don't think it'll be a project or I think we need to hit the ground running straight away, because I think all of us had a lot of patience in terms of Steven Gerrard, but it was like, okay, Gerrard's a rookie manager, he's inherited a mess, give him a bit of time. But I think we're at that stage now, but it's like Celtic have got the same amount of league titles as we've got, and that can't happen. like that's just unacceptable on every level. So next season it's going to be no project, no give them time. I think we need to hit the ground running straight away. And I think obviously with the new owner, the obviously new ownership coming in, I think they've got big plans and big ideas, and it's going to be. I think it's going to be really good. I think it's going to be really good.
Yeah, interesting to see. It would certainly be a busy summer. Alan, on to the kind of search for a new manager. Latest links during the week kind of include names like Rob Edwards, Gary O'Neill, Russell Martin, Steven Gerrard. I think is still amongst the favourites. Do any of these appeal to you?
One out of the four does. I like Scott. I mean, it's one of these things. Like, if I had my absolute pick, would I pick Gerrard? No. But based on where we are, would I be content seeing Gerrard coming back? I think yeah. He knows what's required, and he's done it before. And I think that'll be an attraction for the new regime as well. Certainly when they went in at Leeds, they brought in Farka and stuff like that. People that had done it before, people that got promoted from the Championship before. I think they'd interviewed Scott Parker as well and things. He got promoted from the Champ. So these are smart guys. They're not going to come in at some point in June, say, right, we own it, sit down, say, right, what do we do now? That just doesn't happen at that level. When they've started negotiations with buying into Rangers, they'll have had this plan in place for months and months. And Mr. Steinson apparently has been the one trying to identify a manager. And I'm very, very confident when I say I think they know exactly who the manager is going to be. And I think that will be, if not quite agreed or signed, I think there'll be plans in place. I think there'll be a gentleman's agreement because they will know fine well what's required here. So I can't believe for a second that this new regime doesn't have the manager already ready to go. Now, precisely who it's going to be, I think they need something that the fans can buy into from day one. Gerrard would give them that. I think the majority would welcome Gerrard back. He's got the presence, he's got the aura. He can carry this club on his shoulders, which is something that other recent managers haven't been able to do. And he understands what's required, and he's done it before. He left us as league champions off an undefeated season, and then he left. I think we're 6 points ahead of Celtic as well when he went to Villa. And that was, that you've got to say it was Gio's tactics, but it was Gerrard's team that got to Seville, and it was the fitness and athleticism that he instilled in that team that played a huge part in that. He really drove standards when he was here, right down to having the stadium remodelled at parts so that the players could have different regimes on match days and things like that. He looked at things in detail. And that's why I think the fans would really buy into Gerrard's coming back. Of course, the flip side to that is, could you get someone in new that nobody sees coming, that everyone can get excited about? That would not be Russell Martin for me, with all respect to Russell Martin. He would come in with, he's been sacked from his last job, and he comes, whether he likes it or not, he comes with that baggage of being a really, really poor player for Rangers when he was here. Really poor. And that will just be baggage that we just don't want. And I don't think the regime would want that. So it's exciting times because it could be someone completely out of left field that nobody sees coming. I see Ancelotti Juniors now in the running, or in the bookies running, I should say. That's a nice headline to say, Rangers manager Ancelotti. Then you sort of say, hang on, I don't know, right, okay, that Ancelotti. It's a bit like kind of Darren Ferguson or Nigel Clough. Do you know what I mean? You just think it's like, are they actually any good? Or Are they just hoping that they've got their dad on speed dial? But something like that, you just don't know how it's going to pan out, and that's why it can be quite exciting. But I just think these guys are more likely to go with someone that's a bit more tried and tested. I just think they will. I don't think they're going to get a young up and coming 35-year-old coach or whatever it is. The chap from Sheffield Wednesday, again, he probably does tick quite a few boxes, but I just don't think the English Championship's a great gauge in terms of how successful either a manager or a player is going to be up here. I think we've seen enough of that over the years. So going with tried and tested, somebody that can hit the ground running, somebody that the fans will buy into, I think Steven Gerrard ticks all those boxes. And I think there'll be a degree of comfort from the 49ers enterprises in bringing him back. Obviously, we've seen he was obviously on a night out and had a skinful, but he's certainly talking about Rangers again and out with fans and into cameras and stuff like that. And I do think it's interesting that he's not been quoted at all about the Rangers job, given how much he's in the media and how much presence he's got. And he's not been asked the question, are you going back to Rangers? He's not been asked it once. And I just wonder, and there's so many rumours and whispers about it, I do just wonder if that's the gentleman's agreement that's been struck, that he will be coming back. But again, pure speculation on my part. But exciting times. I mean, who would you want to see, Brian?
To be honest, I don't know. I mean, for me, Gerrard almost feels like a step back. The way I'm not going to say he can diminish 55, right? But I also think we're in danger of also kind of, kicking under the rug his other 2 seasons plus his record at Aston Villa. I mean, for me, those things can't just be written off. And I don't think he necessarily comes in and just picks up where he left off and everything's rosy in the garden again. I think this rebuild, and Scott, I'll come at you and see what you think, but for me, I think this rebuild needs something new and fresh. And I know it doesn't appear to be in the frame anymore, but I still want Kevin Muscat. I wanted him before we went for Clement. And for me, he would still be my pick. And I know that's unlikely to happen based on kind of rumours and who the bookies are favouring, but I just think we need something fresh and new. And I don't know, to me, Gerrard just feels like going back the way almost, and I think there's people will just be kind of thinking that he'll come in and pick up where he left off and everything will be great, and I just don't think it'll work like that.
Yeah, give me Steven Gerrard over Kevin Muscat all day long, mate. I know, I'm sorry, mate, I completely disagree with you, man, in terms of Kevin Muscat. I just feel like that's just another Ange Postecoglou 2.0, where we're just going to be copying what Celtic done.
Isn't that kind of the point though, given the success he had? And
if
it is an Ange 2.0 and he has the same success, great, I'm happy.
Yeah, but hang on, so right, obviously Ange's done well in Scotland, right? Don't get me wrong, right? He done well, but hang on, so see long term, see Postecoglou, he was never going to be the answer long term for Celtic, right? Like obviously because he had zero plan B, and I feel like Kevin Muscat is just going to be another version of it, another version of Ange, and I don't want that. No, I really don't. Like for example, see with Gerrard though, right? I know people always talk about his cup record. Yeah, I understand that, right? His cup record wasn't great. But the thing is, he won the big one. He won 55. He stopped Celtic doing 10 in a row. And he knows how... One thing about Gerrard, he knows how to beat Celtic. And he understood Rangers to a T, and he knew how to get players fired up for Old Firm games. And for me, Gerrard, it's a no-brainer. And see, one thing that always kind of annoyed me when people would always say, "Oh, Beale was the brains behind Gerrard." Oh, nonsense. It was Steven Gerrard that won 55. It was Steven Gerrard that delivered all that success for Rangers. And for me, I would take him back in an absolute heartbeat. I absolutely would. And it also, in terms of the question of Michael Beale coming back to him, I don't think that will happen. I don't think Michael Beale would want to come back to Rangers considering what's happened. But yeah, I would take Gerrard back because I feel like Gerrard has got unfinished business at Rangers where he'll be like, you know what? I won 55, but I should have done more. And the only reason he left Rangers was purely because the fact he wasn't backed enough. That he said that in obviously the interview with Gary Neville overlap. So I think under a new regime, Gerrard would jump at it. He would jump at it if he's going to get fully back, and he'll be like, you know what, I've got unfinished business here. I want to finish off what I started. So yeah, I would take Gerrard back in a heartbeat.
Yeah, no, it'll be interesting to see what happens. I kind of think that these are both right in terms of. I think it probably will end up being Gerrard because I think he's got that element of comfort for the new owners. You know, that'll be their first big decision, and I feel like they're probably more inclined to go with somebody like Gerrard who does know the club. You know, he's been here before. He's won the big one, as Scott says. So it's probably an easier appointment than you know a relative unknown or a less popular choice. So I feel like it probably will be Gerrard, but it'll be interesting to see how that goes. And as I say, if he gets the job, as if any manager gets the job, he'll get the full backing. But for me, I would just prefer something new. Maybe that's just me wanting something new and shiny.
But I think we're all in agreement that we don't want Russell Martin. I don't think anybody wants Russell Martin.
They would remember it was a horrible game. I can't remember if it was a semi-final or a final. That was how long ago it was. There was an Old Firm game at Hampden. Russell Martin, he basically laid the ball off for a Celtic player to score. And I remember it so vividly because I was behind the goal and he laid it off and he saw the Celtic team up score and he's got his head in his hands before the ball's in the net. I just remember at the time just going, and then I'm sure it was after that he came out and said, I thought I've done enough to earn a contract at Rangers. And, he's sitting there, he's blundering around the pitch and, we've got Bruno Alves on the bench. It harks back to such dark times. So no, I just couldn't. Obviously I would get behind him if he came in, but I just couldn't get excited about Russell Martin being the Rangers manager. I just couldn't, and I think that's a feeling that would echo throughout the fan base as well. I think he'd arrive with a negative balance in the bank because of his playing days, whereas someone like Gerrard arrives with a positive balance, and I think that is really important. But as I say, if it's someone completely new that we're not expecting and hasn't been in the papers and hasn't been in the bookies' odds, then that's exciting as well because you don't know what you're going to get. But brings with it, a lot of increased risk. I don't think we've settled on anything, have we? Is Gerrard come back or is he not? Or is it Russell Martin? I don't know. We don't know. But it's fun to discuss it.
But also, sorry, Brian, can I just say as well, right? See, I'm at that stage as well where I want a big name. I want box office. So, see my top three, like not in order. It would be Steven Gerrard, Jose Mourinho. Controversial one. I know everyone's not a fan of it. Frank Lampard. I would take Frank Lampard. I wanted Frank Lampard back in 2021. I think he's a very underrated manager, and I don't. Graham Souness. He agrees with me. he wanted Lampard over Clement, but I think Lampard is a good manager. I would take him in a heartbeat. But if he gets Coventry promoted, I don't think Lampard. I don't think that will happen anyway, because I don't think they'll be willing to pay that compensation fee. But that's my top three. I want a big name. I want box office because I just feel like we're at that stage now where I think as Rangers fans we're as a support. I think we've had a lot of patience over the years, but now I think our patience is running very thin, and we want something like for example, when we appointed Gerrard back in 2018, where there was a real buzz around it. Where obviously the fact when Gerrard was unveiled as manager, obviously fans turned up Ibrox, and it was. I want something like that. I don't want a kind of mediocre, unknown appointment. I want something big.
It's interesting, Scott, because if I think about the type of manager that I want, and you're obviously saying you want box office, I kind of almost don't want box office. I just want a manager that's got a proven track record of playing a style of play that can beat the teams that we need to beat, as in the low block, 10 men behind the ball, the teams that we've struggled against. I don't think Jose Mourinho, well, first of all, I don't think Jose Mourinho will happen because I think I think that's just kind of fantasy land for some. But even if it was a realistic possibility, I don't think his style of play is necessarily what we need. And I don't really want a headline writing manager. I just want a manager that's got a style of play that is proven to beat the teams that we need to beat. And for me, I would rather that than a kind of big flashy name. I get that it worked with Gerrard, but at the same time, Gerrard, as you said, Gerrard got a lot of patience. The next manager, whoever it may be, he's not going to get to his third season to win a league title, is he?
But see, also when you talk about Jose though, like it's not like Jose's going to set up with part, like obviously like playing against, like for example, playing against Ross County, parting the bus. He's not going to do that in Scottish football. Obviously, he's going to adapt, and it's not going to be like brutal football to watch. Like I think that's another thing as well. Whereas a big like misconception with Sean Dyche, like I wouldn't be against a Sean Dyche appointment if I'm being totally honest. But like when people think that we were to appoint Sean Dyche, that you would play constant negative football, all that kind of thing. No, he wouldn't. He had to do that when he was managing like Burnley and Everton. Because like look what happened obviously with Vincent Company when he managed Burnley. Like he obviously tried to play that kind of like Pep Guardiola style of football, and then he got obviously relegated, finished rock bottom. And obviously Sean Dyche wouldn't necessarily do that if he was to become Rangers manager. But I think with Jose, he's for me obviously one of the greatest managers of all time, and he'll not play that kind of negative kind of football when he's playing the likes at Aberdeen and whatnot in the SPFL, because obviously you just can't do that. But it's obviously like Jose's managed at elite level. He knows the pressures of managing a big club, whereas Clement, not so much. So obviously Clement would try to play that negative kind of style of football where he was treating like for example, like Dundee United, like they were bloody Barcelona, you know. So, but not like Jose. I think the only way that will happen is if he's a free agent, because we're not going to pay Fenerbahce that compensation fee. But that's what I would love. That's my top three, Brian. Jose Mourinho, Steven Gerrard, or Frank Lampard. That's the three that get me excited. The rest, I'm just a bit, yeah.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if any of that comes to pass. We could probably talk about this all night, Alan, but on to the game on Wednesday. It's a last game at Ibrox of the season. Finally, the season is coming to a close. I think we can all celebrate that. If nothing else, is it now time to look towards next season and start to give serious game time to players like Siala, Rice, Igaman, Cortez? If not now, then when?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. The last two games, Ferguson's got the monkey off his back in terms of not winning a game at Ibrox and conceding, not keeping a clean sheet and all this kind of stuff. So we've set that straight. The final two games, I think the attendance on Wednesday at Ibrox is going to be really low. I don't think it'll be much of a crowd. So just put the youngsters in, get Siala and Rice and Curtis, get Casemiro in to try and get some minutes, Cortez, whatever. Just get these guys in, give them some minutes. The fans are at the stage, even if we don't win the game, if the team's still young and inexperienced, they're not going to go ape shit at the team. They'll accept it. And then Hibs, obviously, next weekend, same again for me. Maybe a few cameos for players that are going to say goodbye and might be leaving in the summer. Do you remember the Easter Road game? I think it was just before Gerrard came in. It was 5-5. Do you remember that?
Yeah, Jordan Russell's best game in a Rangers shirt, I think.
Aye, he scored a goal and he also got absolutely halved by Scott Allen, and the easiest, most straightforward red card you'll ever see, and the ref bottled it. But nevertheless, it could easily be another game like that. Just a season ender, both teams looking forward to the holidays, strange lineups, another 5-5 or something like that. But again, it doesn't matter. The season's done. It's been an absolute disaster. It's been even worse than last season. We just need to put it behind us and look forward to a new dawn in the summer. But again, I'm not really basing this on anything other than just kind of jungle drums and some whispers. But I'd be quite surprised if we don't get some sort of announcement quite soon about what's going to be happening next season. I think, Rangers PR is dreadful. Don't get me wrong; they can't control media narratives at all. But I think at least there is some understanding and some appreciation that the fans need buy-in right about now. They need something to get excited about. And I just wonder if there's going to be an announcement, if not next week, relatively quickly after the Hibs game, in terms of what we can expect for next season. Because, the close season is not going to be that long. Our first Champions League qualifier is going to be, mid-July? So the players are going to be back in mid-June. That's only 5 weeks away. It's really not long. And we need to know what we're coming back to. So I'm hopeful and keep my fingers crossed that we get some sort of announcement pretty sharp. The last two games, again, what will be will be. They don't really matter in the grand scheme of things. So let's just get some youngsters out there and see what they can do.
Scott, is that where you're at for the next two games? It's all about just let's see some of the youth and try and build some sort of positivity going into next season and the summer.
Yeah, that's the thing. Obviously today It was a nice result. Second half was obviously it was good. But yeah, right now, I would like to see some fresh blood come into the team and just something different. But as I was saying earlier on, I don't think Barry Ferguson's going to do that because he's still got it in his head that he's going to get this Rangers job. So he'll be fielding out the strongest team possible. He's not going to be resting players or whatever because he's still thinking if I win the next 2 games, I've still got a good chance of getting this gig on a full-time basis. So yes, I would like to see some fresh blood coming into the team or him to like kind of change up a wee bit and drop some players and whatnot. But he's not going to do that. He's not going to do that. But yeah, like yes, today was nice, even though it doesn't like really mean much. Obviously, it's always great to beat Aberdeen. But to end the season by beating Dundee United and then obviously beating Hibs, it would be nice. It would be nice because obviously, as Alan was saying, this season, apart from Europe, it's been a total car crash. It's been a car crash, and I think we're just all ready, Brian, for it to be over and then just forget about it.
Yeah, I think ending the season with 2 victories is kind of the least we can ask. So hopefully they can manage that. But I think we'll call it a time there. All that's left for me to do is thank my guests. Alan, thanks always.
Yeah, cheers, lads. Good to see you again.
Cheers. Scott, thanks for joining.
Pleasure's always waiting. Also, can I just say, James Tavernier's the best right back to ever great Scottish football.
Just had to get that in there, didn't you?
I had to.
Well, it's been live tonight. The show will be available on all podcasting platforms: iTunes, Spotify, Acast, and Stitcher. We'll be back on Friday. I think it's Craig and Ben that are on the obviously we're looking back on the Dundee United match and looking ahead to our final game of the season. Until next time, bye for now.